If we've not connected before, my name is Hannah Wilson. I'm a former teacher and head teacher, and I'm the co-founder of Diverse Educators. And we started 7 years ago, and we are a team of associate trainers, coaches, and consultants who support schools and other organisations. We do work in other sectors with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And this is one of the sessions we've done in a series called our Collaborative Partnership series. We get to meet and work with brilliant people. We want you to know how brilliant these people are. So it's already about a space to join up the dots and to amplify different orgs out there doing work that complements our work. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Rubina and Shireen a couple of times now, and some of their colleagues as well. And I know you're going to get lots from today's session. So who are we? We are an intersectional DIB training company. We really want us to be thinking about all 9 protected characteristics as identified in the Equality Act. And that's why there's 9 colours on the floor here. Some organisations only spotlight one of those identities, but for most people, we have multiple layers to who we are, and it's how those different identity pieces come together. So that's kind of the premise of how we work. We think holistically about whole humans. And our mantra is be where you're celebrated, not tolerated. We all are very jarred by the language around the British values about teaching children, particularly in schools, to tolerate one another. We don't think anyone should be experiencing tolerance. We think it should be about acceptance, love, respect, empathy, and celebration. So that's our hero image. Here's our vision. Everyone is celebrated in every classroom, in every school, and that's the pupils, that's the staff, and that's also the parents and the carers. We want everyone to feel seen, heard, of value, and to have that level of belonging. And we are all about connecting, collaborating. It's about us working together, that idea of working together, we can go further, we can have more impact. We really try to celebrate the successes and amplify the stories of diverse people to make sure that the right people are getting access to the work, but B, are being seen to be doing the work, and that's being attributed to them. It's been interesting over the last few weeks seeing what's happening about how some things are now becoming commercialised as a result of the Bridget Phillipson talk about belonging. Every man and their dog's now doing training on belonging. Okay, so it's making sure that we're actually looking after the people who've been doing this work historically, and we're thinking about the identity of the people we're listening to. So our values are around acceptance, visibility, celebration, belonging, and learning. And you all here today as an opportunity to do some learning and to find out about one of our partners. So I had lots of recommendations about the reverse mentoring practice through my network, and a number of my DIB leaders who I work with have worked with Rubina or colleagues on this concept of reverse mentoring. I'm someone who spent a lot of time mentoring, and I'm also a qualified coach. And this was for me the bit I wanted to unlock to really understand the concept of reverse mentoring. So Ruby's joining us today to talk us all about it, all through it. So if you don't know right now, you are going to find out a lot from Ruby about what the offer is. So Rubina, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to hand over to you to get your slides up, to unmute yourself, and to connect with the room. And thanks to the people who've just pulled through. Great to see you, Adam. Great to see you, Seher. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for that quick intro, Hannah. And honestly, thank you for inviting me to be able to facilitate this session with all those fabulous educators out there that are doing this work. And also you raised about a few of the challenges now we're experiencing. How do we actually overcome that? And I'm hoping today I enlighten you with a new tool that you can potentially consider in your educational practice as well. So really quickly, I'm just going to share my slides and then we can start. So bear with me 1 minute because I know Zoom may take some time to load it. So everyone can see my screen. Fingers crossed, got a thumbs up from Hannah, which is great. So yes, so my name is Rubina Ruby Begum. My pronouns are she, her. I am one of the Reverse Mentoring Practice Limited consultant and practitioner. So I help with delivery of a lot of our programs. We help with the development of the content. We also support a lot of our participants and clients who partake in a lot of our programs as well. So I'm here today to talk about reverse mentoring and thinking about eliminating discrimination one conversation at a time, particularly in education. So that's what I'm hoping to do today. So a bit about me. So you're probably wondering who I am. So I'm a British born. So I was born in England. I am British born Bangladeshi, Muslim, heterosexual woman. I use the pronouns she, her. I'm also an academic, a teacher, I mentioned a consultant, but I also like to say I'm a scholar activist as well. I like to practice what I preach. So, you know, when you are an educator, there's a natural tendency. We want the information, we want the knowledge, we want the tools. But I also like this concept of actually taking that knowledge and putting it into practice, but also further developing it as well. So that's a bit about me, in terms of what I do. And in terms of my background as well, you'll be happy to know I used to be a teacher myself. So I started off in the primary education sector. And it wasn't for me. So I was more your provocateur. So I was like, why are we doing this? Because I asked too many questions. I got the vibe that I'm not needed in that space. So I kind of moved into secondary school teaching. Absolutely loved it. Very challenging, but I also felt that there was more work that needed to be done, especially listening to the voices of our students. And I'm sure any secondary school teachers here that are on the call will understand the level of challenge is completely different. The dynamics are different, especially when it comes to educating our students, but also acknowledging the wider external factors that's going on in this child's life. And how does that affect me in being the best teacher I can be for this child? And we have the teacher professional standards, we have all of that telling us, you know, listen to the voices of all our students. But I'm sure you probably in this space where you're thinking it is quite difficult actually when I'm responsible for 32 children in a classroom. And through that, I did a lot of challenging the status quo. So I also did a bit of challenging in the secondary school sector as well. And during that journey, what happened was 9/11 took place, and obviously the after effects of 9/11. So I was actually training to teach during that period as well. So while I was teaching in primary and secondary, and then I moved into FE. Now, I was about to finish my educational studies to become a teacher, and I remember someone challenging me, and they said, why should a woman that looks like you be allowed to teach my child? That resonated with me for the rest of my career to this day as I sit here in front of you. I made a vow and a promise to myself to reform education so that people of difference can educate not only students, but we celebrate that. We celebrate that in that difference and look at actually what are the potential innovations that come out of that. What are the challenges we get, but how can we overcome that? Really celebrating what we bring, not only as teachers, but what our students bring, because we are at the heart of our communities that we serve. Yes, we are teachers, but that's not all we have. And that's what I experienced in my journey. We have multiple hats. Sometimes we're a teacher, we're an educator, but then a child comes in with a safeguarding issue. Then we have to become a pastoral care supporter. Then we might have to manage cases. So these various of different hats became into fruition. And as a Muslim teacher, when I heard that, I think what happened was I started questioning it. Do I actually want to be a teacher with the protected characteristics that I have that are creating a discomfort for these people? That was the wrong way for me to think, because actually the value I bring as a teacher comes from the very essence of my being, the humanity that I bring, but also the expert knowledge. And there was no doubt I had both. And I chose to then reform education policy. I thought, nope, I'm going to use my talent and I'm going to move into HE and I'm going to work with them to look at how can we make a really, really inclusive environment, putting the students' voices at the heart, but also our staff as well, because we often get missed. So it's about how do we bring that. So that was my journey. And I ended up working with the United Nations in terms of supporting them, looking at the impact of Brexit, but also working with local communities, looking at actually how we can bridge communities with our educational secretary, who presented our voices within the government, and actually get them to understand what is the educational sphere, what are the challenges. And that kind of really ignited my spark to reform education in its true sense, not only in terms of how we teach, but how our students learn and how we assess, but also manage everything that fits into that as well. So that's a bit about me. So I came into reverse mentoring practice. So today's session is about reverse mentoring and how that can help you within your industry. within your institution, your organization, whether you're a teacher, whether you're senior leadership team, whether you're a parent governor. I don't know what your backgrounds are. And I'm hoping that in the chat box, you'll put it in so I get to know a bit more about you. So today I'm going to go through the quick questions. I've got a few questions, Mentimeter, and I'll show you the QR code to sign on. And then I'm going to talk to you a bit about reverse mentoring practice, the boring stuff, a bit about the background of the company. And it's only be a couple of minutes. And then we're going to have a discussion about what is reverse mentoring? What do you know already about it? And what it is in terms of its essence in Reverse Mentoring Practice Limited. And then I'm going to talk about reverse mentoring in education. What are the benefits? You know, with my experience of working in that industry as a reverse mentoring practitioner and working in education, how am I seeing the benefits, the impacts? What have I seen, and bring that to your knowledge as well. And then I will give you around 20 minutes, good time for us to have a really good discussion where you can ask me some questions. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to answer them. And if I don't, I promise you, I will get back to you or I'll signpost you. So that's the plan of the next kind of half an hour that you've got with me. So really quickly, I hope you all have a phone, a smartphone potentially, that can scan a QR code. So if you can, I would really appreciate if you could scan this QR code and just give me a thumbs up when you have done that. And then it should take you to a Mentimeter PowerPoint slide. And I'd like you to answer the 2 questions that you see on your slide. And as you're doing that, I am going to share my screen as well, so you can see the responses coming through. So I want you to answer the 2 questions. And the reason why I want to do this is I just want to know what the knowledge is so far about reverse mentoring. Okay. So just give me a thumbs up that everyone's on there. Everyone's on there. Sahar, Adam, Ellie, everybody okay getting on the Mentimeter? Perfect. So everybody's jumped on. So I'm just going to stop sharing my PowerPoint slides. I'm just going to share the Mentimeter itself. I could already see a few people have responded. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So the first question is, have you participated in reverse mentoring programs before? So before today, have you come across reverse mentoring programs? Have you participated in any? I'd just like to know. So just a yes and no answer. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to respond. Hopefully the PowerPoint's the screen's loaded for you. So it's really interesting to see a lot of people put no, which is great for me. It just means the content is going to be more relevant. So my next question, I'm hoping everybody had a chance to respond. I've got 6 people on call, responses, another 6 or 5 people to respond. Cool. If you need the QR code, because I've changed screen, you'll see the Mentimeter code at the top of the screen, so you can put it into your URL. So if you go to menti.com and put in the code, it'll give you the same screen as well. So if you don't have the QR code or you're too late, don't worry, you can do it by the code as well. Okay, so cool. So everyone clicked no so far. My next question is, I think everyone responded. Bear with me 1 minute. My next question is, have you heard of reverse mentoring? Yes or no? Got 2 responses. So if you just heard it in conversation, maybe someone shared the idea, maybe someone's just thrown it in, or maybe you read about it. Maybe you're seeing the hype that people have got on LinkedIn or any talks that you may have been to. So a lot of people have heard about it, which is great. One person's put no. Interesting. So the reason why I did that is because I wanted to gauge what we know. So then hopefully later on, as I progress in in today's session, I'll be able to share with you what it is and what it looks like, so that you have a greater in-depth understanding. You can help me in that journey as well. So really quickly, so my next slide, we'll come back to those questions, is the RMP journey. So I mentioned I'm from the reverse mentoring practice. Just a quick 1-minute whistle stop tour. The company was founded by Stacey Johnson, who's got an MBE, who's an associate professor at University of Nottingham, who's also a chief scientific officer for the company itself. Now, she is a nurse by background, currently training nurses, but she's also somebody who has been particularly interested in reverse mentoring And she came across that in earlier parts of her journey as well. And I'll talk a bit about that later on. She also kind of developed the framework and model that underpins a lot of the work that we do and that we have been doing with a lot of the institutions around us as well. And you'll get to know a bit more about Stacey as I go along. The key thing I really want to celebrate as well, she is an unapologetic Black woman who's Trinidadian, and she has been a really good outspoken person about reverse mentoring and the benefits it can bring in all sectors as well. So she adopted a participatory education consulting style approach to develop the program when she came across it in 2010. So in 2010, as I mentioned, she used to be an associate, well, she is an associate professor. She traveled to, in her travels of a nurse, she came across reverse mentoring in a newspaper article. It piqued her interest and she brought it back to the UK and developed her own framework and model to then facilitate one of her pilot programs with NHS England in 2016. Now, fast forward to where I am here with you today, we have now got 10 members of staff. We are now an official company, and we are now working with 75 plus organizations, predominantly NHS. We're also working with the education. We're also working with the public sector and local authorities. So if you're UK based, local authorities are your governing bodies. So they're government funded bodies that are responsible for allocating funding, supporting public sectors, especially when it comes to health, education, and other areas of civic society as well. So we are working with around 75 plus organizations. We've had 100 cohorts of this program that I'm going to talk to you about, and 400 plus cohorts, and we've currently got quite a variety as well. We have now moved out to the USA and also to Europe as well. So we are working with a lot of international individuals as well, with their companies and their organizations as well. So this is where we are today. So in terms of reverse mentoring and what its objectives are in the company, the framework and model that I'm going to touch upon is what we've developed that supports us as practitioners today to be able to deliver high impact reverse mentoring programs so that you can foster transformative relationships with individuals in the organization, especially when it comes to junior staff and senior leaders. We want to predominantly enhance the culture of humility of your leaders that equips them to transform inclusion, not only on the front facing level, but on an institutional level. And the reason why I mention that is because it's really important that we bring in our senior leaders within those spaces to really harness and understand what is equality, equity, what is liberation, what is diversity, what is true inclusion practices and belonging in terms of the people that are impacted by it. So we want to bring those two voices together and give the power to the juniors people to be able to lead that. So we don't see boundaries. We do everything in our power to deconstruct those boundaries and barriers that prevents us from communicating our truth. Maybe challenge the institutional barriers. Maybe we want to deconstruct the structures and powers that be to be able to really bring in the voice of the individuals who are impacted. We want to transform organizations through the power of reverse mentoring. We want to eliminate discrimination in the workplace, in our environments, in our organizations, one conversation at a time. And we are disruptive. We are relentless. We are compassionate. So you'll notice that my way of facilitating is quite radical, and I've been told that before. So we celebrate radical candor because that brings in our true authenticity in the work that we do, right? Because I know and believe that if I didn't bring that, you wouldn't be able to trust me with this. So in order to build that trust and rapport, I will bring my full self to this conversation. And I hope you can bring yourself to this conversation as well. So those are our key objectives that we follow within what we do. So what is reverse mentoring? So I'm going to go back to the people who responded and who said, I have heard of it before. The people who said yes, I'd like to open up the floor to you and ask you, what have you heard? Would anyone like to come in? What have you heard about reverse mentoring? Do share. Just take a guess.
I've heard it being used in corporate where you haven't got global majority representation at the senior leadership. So you use global majority people who are middle leadership to mentor upwards, someone who holds a different racial identity to them. So they're senior but have a different identity. That's the model I've mainly heard about.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing that people may hear was traditionally it's where you have middle managers working with senior leaders. I'm wondering, has anyone else come across reverse mentoring, or the people who responded, they have heard of reverse mentoring. Have you heard anything different to what Hannah's just shared? Or maybe you read about it?
I heard that it's also a way of getting young people's voices heard.
Yes, yes. So that's touching upon the traditional definition of reverse mentoring as well. And I'll give you a snapshot of that as well. So thank you for that. I can see a blank screen. So Ellie, I can only see a blank screen on your face, but thank you for that. Anyone else has got anything different to add to that? No, that's cool. So what is reverse mentoring? So touching upon Ellie's comment, it is what Wendy Murphy in 2012, she was actually a person, a professor, basically looking at gender inequities. So she defined reverse mentoring when a work in a senior position is mentored by someone more junior position than themselves. Now, in the earliest form of reverse mentoring, when it didn't have a definition as such, was during the electrical industry back in the 60s. And that's what you're touching upon, Ali. That's when the first type of reverse mentoring was introduced, where actually within the electrical industry, they started bringing in interns, they started bringing young people to the industry. And what they realized is as they started bringing in internships and interns and young people into the industry to work in their industry, they also brought a wealth of knowledge that they didn't have. So they had knowledge about technical, digital influence, how they could use digital technical platforms to really transform the industry. So they actually started thinking, hey, let's get these young people to teach us some stuff. So they actually got the young people to actually facilitate discussions, show them things to do and how to do it. And then when I mentioned Wendy, she then took that idea and furthered that to look at gender inequalities, right? She wanted to look at women. Why is it there's a gender pay gap? Why is it women are more prone to harassment in their workplace? But in reverse mentoring practice, we want to take it up a notch. So we've actually expanded the definition to apply to anybody in any situation who sees themselves to have less perceived power, in a more disadvantaged position from an underrepresented group, from a marginalized oppressed group, to mentor someone that is more powerful to them. So Hannah, as you mentioned, this middle managers and corporate sector with senior leaders, we're actually applying it to people like us. It applies to everybody in any situation that can reverse mentor their senior leader, or even in this situation, a student reverse mentoring their teacher. It could be a teacher reverse mentoring SLT, parent governors. It could be a board of trustees. It could even be the council or the governing body that funds your jobs and funds your institution. How do we actually reverse the conversation so they actually know what's going on the front line, on the job, on the shop floor? So that's what we want to do, is reverse that communication. It could also mean that you tap into the very communities, the parents. You want to foster a stronger relationship with the very communities you serve. So how do we do that? Let's bring the parents in. They could reverse mentor you to really harness a cultural understanding, right? Really empowering you to develop the skills you need to really, really transform your environments as well. So reverse mentoring, what you may have heard of it or not heard of it, it's recognized that it is a methodology to use. But what I do and what I do within the company, we actually develop and deliver it with careful consideration of the nuances and the sensitivities it can bring. Because when we are actually bringing someone in to talk about the various protected characteristics, what it's like to be a British-born Bangladeshi Muslim woman, what it's like to be someone who's come from another country to this country to reside for safety, to have a better quality of life. Then you have children going to that school or institution. Then you find out that they're being bullied, but there's a lack of understanding, cultural understanding. Just recently, I saw on TikTok a mother calling her institution and telling her teacher, her child's teacher, to stop misgendering her child because her child was transitioning. But there was a complete disconnect between the two. So what I'm saying is, when we do reverse mentoring, you need to have careful consideration of the nuances to ensure the power dynamics are not mishandled. So what we're trying to do is celebrate the differences by giving the power back to the very people who are affected by discriminatory practices to be able to educate and guide their leader, their teacher, or the person in power in their world. So you'll be holding the hand and leading them through almost like your world. So it's not this concept of walking in your shoes, it's actually getting them to walk in your world and what it's like to be in that world. What are the challenges you faced as a teacher coming into school, knowing global conflicts are impacting not only you, but your children that you are responsible for in that classroom. But then you are told by the policy that you have to follow that you can't talk about it. You have to be careful about your political opinion. You have to be careful about the safeguarding issues. How are we navigating that? What are the impacts on you as a teachers? What is the impact on you not being able to truly fully connect with your students who are probably being hurt by what's happening in the world? We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The bare minimum is food, shelter, warmth. But what does Maslow's hierarchy of needs means to us as educators in that classroom when we know all of this is happening? And that's why, we developed the remedy framework. So from our experiences of what we, heard, we have worked and consulted with so many different organizations. Proactively, we developed this framework. So what that means is we actually work with the organizations. We have executive board meetings. We get in touch with your leaders, find out what are the pains, what are they experiencing, what are the staff saying, what are your students saying, what is the retention rates, what is the disparity between attainment, what is going on, how many staff turnover do you have? We have this conversation to really understand what's going on, what is going on, how many reports of bullying and harassment is there, what is the main issue for you within your institution. So we work with them very closely. Then we get the organization to commit to do reverse mentoring so that they are ready to be able to commit to the process, to be able to say, I will go first. I put myself forward and really put my humility to the forefront to be challenged. And I am submitting to this journey. And then we schedule a plan, get them to commit financially, schedule a plan, get them to commit the resources, the time, and then we recruit reverse mentors and mentees. The reverse mentors in this program are anybody who is seen to have a less power or influence than the person in that conversation. So like I said, the dynamic could be teachers and SLTs. It could be parents and teachers. It could be students and teachers. It could be student leaders and governing bodies. So we will identify that within the beginning of that process. Who is that dynamic going to be? We recruit those individuals and then we train and prepare them. We give them the preparation and we also finalize the pairings as well. We do all of that. We don't get the organization to do it. We do all of that. So reverse mentoring in education. So why reverse mentoring in education? How can it help aid and address the key issues that the education sector is facing at the current moment? Before I bring in real life examples and some case studies of organizations we work with, I just want to know, what are the issues that you are facing when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion and belonging within your sector? You don't have to say which school or organization. I just want to get an idea. What are the current issues that you are seeing evidently within the institutions that you're working for?
I'll start. There's been a spike in homophobia and racism. Every school that I'm talking to is seeing an increase in incidents and disclosures rather than a decrease at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Hannah. I'm just wondering, what is everyone else? Because, like you mentioned about homophobia and then the racism, and I'm just particularly interested in, because I know a few months ago we had the riots in the UK, right? So I have a strong feeling, again, when I'm talking about external factors and how it's playing out, what is the connection here? What's going on? Are we identifying that? I'm just wondering, anyone else, please do share, even as a teacher as well, like how, what are you facing? What are the challenges you're facing? You can put it in the chat box if you don't feel confident in.
I think Seher's just put her video on. Jump in, Seher.
Hiya.
Hi.
I work in a very diverse school where about 66 languages are spoken at homes. And I feel that I myself has recently, I mean, not so recently, I did a master's on culturally responsive teaching.
Yeah.
And I find a huge need of it even in our schools, which are so diverse,
Yeah.
and particularly in our schools, which are so diverse, because I find that our students are so conflicted in their identity. They just don't, that sense of belonging does not exist for all of them. And in order to improve their self respect, their sense of belonging, for them to be part of mainstream society, it is so needed in a society like ours, and especially in a borough like Harrow, where we are in London. Despite being a very diverse area, we have high crimes, young students, young people wanting to belong, go and join these gangs, and they get marginalized, victimized, and all sorts of things. So I am working very hard to decolonize our curricula,
Yes.
and also improve our teaching and learning, our pedagogy, to incorporate culturally responsive teaching.
Thank you so much for that, Sahar. You touched everything that I was going on to talk about, because when we talk about the pains in our institutions, if we're not connected with it, it's very hard for us to challenge it, to be able to deconstruct it, to be able to develop the pedagogy behind it. They're really thinking about actually what are the thought processes behind why we're doing what we're doing. Why is it we're more reactive in our teaching when things happen, but not being proactive? And I think touching
yeah,
because you know, you mentioned about knife crime, right? Knife crime is huge. Even I'm currently based in the Midlands, in Birmingham of the UK, and knife crime is a constant conversation that is happening. But the disconnect between why is it happening, where has it come from, is missing. So
yeah.
we're reactive and saying, this is knife crime, this is what it is, this is the harm. But is anyone taking the step to do that? You know, when we talk about culturally responsive, is actually saying, do we have the humility, the cultural humility to say, why?
Yeah, I think it's important that we make those changes at grassroots level. And the first thing that our children are in our classrooms, where we tokenize their ethnicity. When we talk about just Black History Month in October, it is so wrong. It needs to be part of their mainstream education for them to improve their understanding of themselves and their stance in UK society as well as the global society. And these changes have to be made within our classrooms. And particularly, I think a vast majority of our teachers are white. And for them to understand this from that perspective, it is so important for them to be able to address their own biases and to learn how to approach different subjects within their curriculum areas. It is so needed.
Yeah. And Sahar, you touched upon quite a few points there. And thank you so much for your input, because it's so relevant to what I was going to touch upon. Because, you know, my challenge to you as a fellow educator, you know, we have ambassador schemes, we have student leadership schemes, we have all of these schemes thinking that this is how students feel belonged. But my challenge would be, that's work. So that's further work for them. But is it in its true essence creating an environment where people can feel safe to bring themselves? Going back to my journey, I was told by a white individual who was also training to teach, told me she would not want her child to be taught by me. That is already existing within that area. And we are also got issues within the way we are training our teachers. Imagine if we had that cultural responsive attitude, even right at the beginning, because it took me to put my values as a teacher to the forefront. And I challenged it, saying, and I cited the teacher professional standards that Ofsted inspectors on, which is to embody the values of inclusion, right? And I said to her, I went, how are you embodying the values of of being British by you saying that you've already othered me and discriminated against me. So I think the bigger question is, why should I want somebody like you teaching my child? If you are already closing the conversation without even understanding where has that thought come from for you to feel that way towards a diverse group of teachers. So it's not only in the classroom, it's up the hierarchy. So how do we actually start to break or deconstruct those institutional barriers and discriminations that exist that we are facing as because we're firefighting. We're the ones on the front line seeing students come to us confused about their identity, students coming to us who have joined a gang. In my teaching career, when I was in the secondary school teachers, I became privy to knowledge of students being used as escorts for drug dealers. But I was told I could not get involved because those kids were actually going off school grounds to be able to participate or do whatever that was happening. And I couldn't intervene. So my challenge was actually, and this was 10 years ago, and I know we've moved forward so much, but that to me was a safeguarding issue. And I felt personally responsible, and not only as a teacher, but as a human. So there are many issues about underrepresentation. There's about inequities in funding, especially how much money are we getting as schools? And why is it those schools in the very diverse localities are getting less? You know, why is there disparities in how much funding we get? Why is there limited access to resources? Why is it the cultural structural barriers, and why is the discrimination happening within our classrooms? Where is it coming from? What is the culture of our schools? Are we truly living the values of this of what we are preaching, that we celebrate belonging? Are we really? And I know everybody on this call is probably seeing some of the things or the issues or dilemmas that really needs to be heard by senior leaders, because they have the power to transform and change the culture, right? By one conversation at a time. There's also, in my experience within reverse mentoring and education, we also heard about the lack of collaboration, co-production, right? Why are students and parents not being brought in to support us within the teaching methodology, right? The lack of inclusive leadership and mentorship. I know a lot of people have got mentoring programs, they have sponsorship programs, but how many of us truly feel heard for the very essence of who we are? So like, for example, I speak English as, you know, if somebody speaks English as an additional language, the challenges that there could be in terms of their progression, access to progression, right? Are we actually having a conversation about that? And there's a researcher called Herminia Ibarra who talks about it. She actually raises this question about how in education or in sponsorship, in its essence, we often sponsor those who looks like us and talks like us. It's easier. But imagine somebody like you who has a neurodiverse condition, who has a disability, whether that's physical or none, who is from the LGBTQ plus community, who is experiencing, I don't know, challenges because you've just traveled to the UK, trying to settle in the UK with your children, your family. Have you been able to have those conversations with them and the challenges that is happening for you? So these are the issues we've been hearing, not only in the education sector, but also in the NHS sector, right? About what it's like to transition into an organization that doesn't understand. And that applies to every level of the organization. Please bear with me 1 minute. I'm just going to switch the light on because it's getting dark in England. You apologize. I don't want to disappear on your screen. So, you know, so now we know the issues, you know, what have we been doing about it? Okay, so what have we been doing about it? Reverse mentoring in education. So we've actually worked with further education, higher education, and local authorities. We've worked with 9 organizations, and that's resulted in 10 plus cohorts. And a combination of that included doing anti-racism work. So looking at what does it mean to be an anti-racist organization, and we developed a very very bespoke program for that institution to really challenge the leaders to think about their practices, right? Not only in recruitment, not only in the training methodology, the recruitment, the induction process, also what they are asking for their teachers to do with their students. Also looking at sponsorship for inclusion, also looking at reverse mentoring, right? So reverse mentoring, and remember what I said earlier on, bringing the very people who don't feel seen, who are impacted by our policies and our procedures, bringing them at the heart of the conversation and giving them the power to address the barriers that are preventing them to get to the next stage. Attainment gaps. We already know from my time, there's a 5% gap, attainment gap between, you know, your Black, minority, ethnic, global majority group and white counterparts. Whether that's increased or decreased, I don't know, you can help me with that. But there is a disparity in terms of attainment. Regardless of when it is, it still exists. So we're doing a lot more work. We're putting in a lot of prevention methodology. But my ask is, how are we really connecting with the very individuals that are affected by it? Are we taking the time to really understand, to prevent those barriers existing through those one-to-one conversations? There was also about, and Sahara mentioned it, about decolonizing the curriculum, but not only the curriculum, decolonize our thoughts, our approach to teaching, decolonize our own practices that we have also developed, right? Maybe we are going to be the catalyst to challenge others to be able to think differently about the power that Indigenous communities can bring into the learning environment, right? Because, you know, traditionally, teachers were seen as the community leaders of society. They led the people. They were the educators. People looked to them for wisdom. We want to bring that back, because everybody on this call, I can see various different names, and everybody on this call has their own truth, their own lived experience that they can really bring to the forefront to develop the cultural humility of their leaders, but also students can help develop the cultural humility of their teachers by challenging them, right? So Sahar, I want to bring you in. You got a hand up.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that so far the mindset in schools is, when they talk about inclusion, is how we adapt our teaching to suit the needs of students with learning difficulties, with physical disabilities, and so on. However, it is crucial that we understand as educators that inclusion also means incorporating the needs of students from these minority backgrounds, looking at the culture of our students within the classrooms, and to adapting our teaching and learning to suit the needs of those students.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sahar, because what you've highlighted there, it's not a one size fits all. It's not just focusing on one part of the cog. It's actually focusing on the actual fence, the whole picture, rather than that individual cog that we always concentrate on. So not only thinking about inclusive curriculum, but and also focusing on one demographic, but imagine that child, that staff member, or that parent carer, they will have other intersections to their identity. So they may speak English as an additional language, which is also a language barrier, right? But imagine if we're speaking in colloquial language, we're speaking in jargon, they are not going to understand the curriculum. They're not going to understand what you require for them in terms of exams, in terms of, you know, the assessment practices we put in place. So it's about actually, how do we challenge the status quo to think differently and do different things? And the local authority we're working with at the current moment, whilst they've got 2 programs happening in parallel, what they already identified is that actually what was missing is that human connection. That human connection to the very people who are struggling to progress in their institutions. They started to proactively question, why is it that we only have one specific demographic of people representing our institution when we serve a diverse population? Shouldn't that be at the forefront of what we do? And shouldn't that be present in not only the teaching and learning and assessment, but it should be in the leadership teams, right? It should be presented there. And they also looked at the promotion, the hiring process. They also looked at the teaching and learning practices. Actually, how can students come into this journey and help us? And they are also looking at reverse mentoring as well. So we have recently concluded a few programs with a few universities down south, but also in the Midlands, but also up north as well. And what they highlighted to us, the key benefits they found was that their students who concluded the program actually said, it increased their confidence and they felt empowered to have a senior leader / educator in quotes, depending on them to give information, to understand, to gain knowledge as why is it that this is happening? Why is it, there is also a fear. There's a fear culture of trying to challenge, right? And we're trying to deconstruct that within this very intimate one-to-one conversation between a junior member and also senior staff. We want to create that safe space that embraces compassion and humanity by really engaging to understand. And the one thing that I always tell people, curiosity is the ammunition of thought. So really, really asking why. I'm going to get stuff wrong. EDI is always developing. Nobody on this call can ever say they're an expert in ED&I. It's not possible. We're going to get things wrong. That's our humanity. But how willing are we to get things wrong? Right? That's the element of humility. And what we do about it is the actions in solidarity. So through reverse mentoring, students said it developed their leadership skills because they were able to challenge their teachers, their educators, but also they gave them nuggets of information of potential solutions, right? They didn't tell them what to do. They actually ignited the curiosity so that they can then go off and explore what is, I don't know, the South Asian interpretation of cultural humility. They went and explored what is racism. They explored what caused the riots, what was the impact, right? They explored themselves, the global conflicts, right? They even asked themselves, why is it that I only hang around with people who look like me? So they weren't even aware of their own bias actually existed from the things they were reading, the things that they were bringing into the space, and the people they were surrounding themselves with. So they encouraged them to go back to basics. And students said they felt that they meant what it was to be a leader because they had the power to control that conversation, to lead that conversation. They set homeworks, they did the resistance, they gave them actions to complete. And then they also said it really promoted the culture of continuous learning. So yes, reverse mentoring is for 6 months, you do it, but it's about what do you do after? It doesn't just end there. Whereas, other programs, which are great, I'm not saying we're going to stop that. We hope people do reverse mentoring in addition to everything else. So that encourages empathy and understanding. And I'm conscious of time, Hannah, so I'm going to quickly just move to my next slides. But the one thing that I want to share, a quote, is from Paulo Freire, a brilliant Brazilian philosopher who actually explored poverty in his community. And he's a key part of our journey as a company. And he's a thinker that we actually look to help us in our practice as well. And he shared this quote: data alone doesn't motivate leaders to act. It is through shared empathy and understanding people will act, right? So when we want people to act in solidarity, they need to feel, they need to understand, they need to know and really share that pain. So that's what I wanted to kind of share. And that's what a lot of people really, really benefited from in the program. They also said it really supported them to do co-production. So really working with students, whether that's sitting on executive board meetings, whether that's them going to parent governor meetings, to really challenge because they saw the assets that were there within the institution and really bringing them in as a critical friend. How often do we have a critical friend to lean on? Do we have our own board of directors that we can go to and say, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable. What do you think? So really empowered students and the leaders to really connect, not only in terms of developing cultural understanding, but also communication, that trust, that real, authentic, psychological, safe place where students truly felt belonged. They wanted to be an ambassador. We actually have one reverse mentor. He's now a critical friend for her institution, 4 years on, and she is constantly being invited in to support. And imagine your students could do that. Imagine if you could do that for your leaders who are responsible for you, for the work that you do. So ultimately, I just want to share a few quotes and I'll end. You know, we did ask a lot of our leaders who partook in the programs, and this is, you know, someone from the NHS. They said this has been the most important piece of work I've done in the 30 years I've worked for in the NHS. So this experience of reverse mentoring really enhanced their understanding of what it means to be this person that they were paired up with and what challenges and barriers they faced. Then we had someone else who was within the local authority that we're working with, who's responsible for so many different educational organizations and institutions, schools, primary schools, and also community schools. They said your organization has provided safe spaces for our mentors to be able to discuss the mentoring, provided insights and understanding, their lived experience of what it's like to be at the end of racism, and psychological safety. You have helped improve the understanding of mentoring and increase confidence. You push the mentors to have an uncomfortable conversation and take them to the next level. We really like that you are the experts by experience. So really harnessing that criticality. So really using that to our advantage to have uncomfortable conversations that are less superficial, really putting that at the heart to truly understand what it's like to be different. And then the last person said, it's like she turned on a light in a room where I thought the light was already on. I didn't know there was more light. This person was an executive board member who was actually a gay white man, and he was paired up with a Black woman. And when he came to us, he was like, I think I get what it means to be discriminated against. I get the institutional barriers because I've been through it. But then when they said it's like she turned on the light in a room where I thought the light was already on, really showed that this person really ignited and illuminated something they never saw before. So the possibilities are endless. The impact is huge, especially when it comes to equality, diversity, and inclusion. Then we had a few mentors, and one mentor said, it's a gift, isn't it? Reverse mentoring. And they went on to say, how often is it that I get the chance to share with people my lived experience, whether that's as a teacher, whether that's as a student, whether that's as a person who's responsible of looking after the parents with my institution. It's not often that I get to bring my full self to the discussion. And it felt like it was a gift. Another person said, it changed my working life and gave me personal and professional satisfaction. They finally felt seen as the true person that they are. So that brings me to the end of my conversation. I did want to give you longer time to ask me any questions. So please do take the opportunity to ask me any questions. I'm happy to stay on. I'll also create a FAQs sheet for Hannah to share with you as well. Feel free to leave your questions with me if you don't have time to stay on.
Fabulous. What I'm going to do is say thank you and then stop recording so people can ask questions freely. So thank you. We love your passion. We love your provocations. And there was lots and lots to listen to and take away.